Ninja Gaiden is synonymous with pure adrenaline, brutal combat, and a difficulty that separates the weak from the true warriors. Ever since Ryu Hayabusa hung up his katanas after Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, the community has been begging for a worthy return for the franchise. And we're not talking about just any return. We're talking about a Ninja Gaiden 4 that rescues the classic essence while evolving what has always worked. But what exactly do the fans want to see? We've prepared a list of 7 wishes that echo in every corner of the gamer internet, from technical improvements to design choices that might divide opinions. And yes, one of these demands is so controversial it might make you rethink everything about the series. Buckle up, ninjas! Let's dive into what truly matters for the future of this legend. Ninja Gaiden has always been synonymous with challenge, and nothing defines the series better than this almost cruel difficulty, which at the same time respects the player. When I think of a Ninja Gaiden 4, the first thing that comes to mind is the need to maintain this brutality, but without falling into the absurd or frustrating territory that pushes people away. The challenge must be a ladder, not an impassable wall, where every death teaches you something and motivates you to try again, with more attention and strategy. This creates a unique sense of accomplishment, something that few games manage to deliver with such intensity. A fair difficulty for me is one that doesn't punish you simply for being incompetent, but rather one that demands mastery, patience, and constant improvement. And Ninja Gaiden has rarely failed at this. It is vital that the game doesn't make you feel like an idiot for making a mistake, but rather like someone who is always learning and improving. Therefore, I hope that 4 adjusts exactly this balance. Punish the error, yes, but reward the player who invests time in understanding the mechanics, exploring the environment, and mastering the enemies. This makes every boss fight a memorable experience, where every blocked blow, every perfect counterattack is a dance of skill and timing. Another important layer is the design of enemies and attacks. They need to be cruel in execution, but transparent in intention, which means the player must be able to read the attack patterns and signals and prepare to respond. There's no use in an enemy that kills with a random blow without warning or logic. A Ninja Gaiden 4 with this fair brutality seems to me like something that stimulates intelligence, observation, and quick reaction, where the combat is as mental as it is physical, creating an intense rhythm that keeps you glued all the time. And of course, the difficulty must spread to all aspects of the game, including exploration and survival. No exaggerated conveniences, such as overly generous checkpoints or infinite resources. Every resource, every moment of pause to recover energy or prepare a strategy, has to make the player feel like they are taking a risk, that every hit has weight and every mistake penalizes, without being unfair, but with that feeling that only Ninja Gaiden has: adrenaline, tension, and reward in the right measure. This brutal difficulty is the soul of the hardcore challenge that fans seek. In addition, I believe the game should maintain different challenge modes to please everyone, from the fan who wants a more accessible experience to the arbiter of death. That player who wants to prove they are a machine of reflexes and perfect timing. A hardcore mode that preserves the extremely high difficulty, perhaps with more aggressive and punishing enemies, and more balanced modes to ensure that new players can enter the adventure without giving up in the first few hours. Even so, the heart of Ninja Gaiden must beat strongly in this toughness. The difficulty should also have a direct impact on the player's progression and satisfaction. That is, clearing a section or defeating a difficult boss cannot be a mere formality, but a personal victory, which is marked in the player as a unique achievement. A Ninja Gaiden 4 that creates this feeling of true accomplishment is one that will stick in players' memories, not just as another difficult game, but as an epic and unforgettable challenge. Finally, what makes the brutal but fair difficulty so special in Ninja Gaiden is the narrative embedded in it. You are an implacable ninja, a warrior who has no rest, and the game must reflect this toughness in its DNA. The difficulty is not just an obstacle, it is part of the experience's identity, which brings that tightness in the chest, that adrenaline in the blood, and that desire to never give up, to always overcome. This, for me, is the essence that Ninja Gaiden 4 needs to embrace with total passion. When I think of combos in Ninja Gaiden, the first word that comes to mind is fluidity. Nothing compares to the feeling of gliding through combat, chaining strikes with an almost choreographed grace, as if you were dancing a lethal fight. For Ninja Gaiden 4, my expectation is that this fluidity will be taken to a new level, with combinations of attacks that feel natural and at the same time incredible, where the player can express themselves in combat creatively, without feeling stuck to rigid commands or forced connections. Another essential point is the diversity of combos and techniques. To keep the gameplay always exciting and prevent it from becoming repetitive, the game must offer variations that fit multiple fighting styles. A Ninja Gaiden 4 that allows the player to experiment with fast sword combos, addictive long-range attacks, and even moves that mix weapons and acrobatics is one that will keep the fans' interest for hours on end. This variety also allows room for developing a fighting style of one's own, more aggressive, more strategic, or technical, as the player prefers. Another factor I admire is the warm balance between complex combos and accessibility. I don't want the game to penalize the player who doesn't master all the commands right away, but I also want it to reward the effort of those who dive deep and master the more complicated combinations. It's a delicate balance, but it's one of the highlights of the series. Ninja Gaiden 4 should provide this feeling of continuous evolution, where combos and techniques become tools that unleash an almost addictive sense of control and power. Improving the combat system's response is also essential. The precision of the inputs, the speed of the animations, and the perfect integration between movements contribute directly to the feeling of fluidity. A clunky, slow, or poorly synchronized combat would break the whole mood. I want to feel that I am truly in control of a ninja warrior, with quick reflexes and responsive movements, where every button press flows naturally into the next strike or dodge. Furthermore, the presence of iconic techniques should not only be a homage to the series' fans, but an evolution of them, with new versions, upgrades, and perhaps even secret combos that only true masters will be able to discover and dominate. This layer of depth creates a stronger emotional bond with the game, as each technique becomes a personal tool, a symbol of the player's journey through the Ninja Gaiden universe. Ultimately, for me, the success of a combo and technique system in Ninja Gaiden 4 lies in delivering a sense of power and control, which connects the player to the experience of being a legendary ninja. That addictive feeling of performing the impossible at your fingertips, mixing precision, speed, and creativity, is what makes the series so special, and it is exactly what I want to see more of and better in the next chapter. Ninja Gaiden has always been synonymous with brutal difficulty, agility, and precision in combat, and that's exactly what makes the franchise so special for those who know it. What I would really love to see in Ninja Gaiden 4 are new abilities that manage to bring this classic feeling, without losing respect for what made the previous games so iconic. I don't want the kind of novelty that seems like a marketing ploy or something disconnected from the raw, agile ninja style. One ability that, in my opinion, would fit well would be a kind of time manipulation in combat, but in a very subtle way, like an enhancement of the ninja's reflex. Being able to momentarily slow down a blow to counterattack with more precision, without turning the game into a power fest, would keep the essence of the challenge intact and give an extra layer of technique for the player to explore. This time sensitivity, in this case, would have to be an extra difficult training to unlock, living up to the series' hardcore legacy. In addition, I would love to see abilities that encourage the creative use of the environment and the weapon arsenal, something the series already does, but which can be thought of in a more refined way. Imagine a new rapid movement technique between shadows that allows Yakumo to strategically position himself to unleash devastating combos without losing the frantic rhythm. A movement that would need to be used intelligently, exactly as the series has always encouraged. Not just pressing buttons, but thinking about every step. Respect for the legacy also involves the aesthetic fidelity of these abilities. I want to see fluid animations, with that visual style that is already a trademark and sounds that bring a tactile satisfaction to playing. Undoubtedly, a new ability that respects the legacy must cause that thrill when landing the blow. Increase the rhythm of the music and make the fan's heart beat faster, bringing that nostalgia mixed with a sense of organic novelty. And of course, we cannot forget the challenge. The new abilities cannot make the game too easy. They should make the combat more strategic and richer, where hitting the timing is as important as choosing the right technique for each enemy. The game has to continue to be faithful to its identity as a rigorous test of skill, making every victory feel like an epic achievement, especially using these new techniques. The adaptation of these new abilities could also encourage a personalized playstyle where each player could choose how to enhance Yakumo. Imagine an evolution system that respects the legacy, offering options to make the gameplay faster, more technical, or with an emphasis on evasive attacks and counterattacks. This without losing the fundamental basis of the series, bringing back that feeling of ninja master who dominates every movement without leaving the essence behind. In summary, for me, new abilities that respect the legacy of Ninja Gaiden mean a perfect balance between the classic and the new, a natural extension of already recognized techniques, respecting the difficulty, fluidity, and visual identity of the franchise. This mixture is what, in my view, would make the fourth title not just a good game, but a true homage to the fans who carry the passion for the series from the beginning. When we talk about exploration and movement in Ninja Gaiden, I believe we are truly at the heart of the experience. What fans want in Ninja Gaiden 4, in my opinion, is to feel freedom at a totally impressive level, where controlling Yakumo is not just maneuvering a character, but experiencing the millinery art of the ninja in its most dynamic form. The movement has to be a show in itself, a true ballet of strikes, jumps, and acrobatics, where every step and every jump counts towards absolute mastery of the scenario. Exploring a world with varied and well-connected environments, which rewards the player's curiosity, is always something that leaves any fan passionate. However, what I really want is for this exploration to be integrated with the movement in such a natural way that everything seems like an extension of Yakumo's own body. Running on walls, climbing quickly, jumping from ledge to ledge, sliding on surfaces, and using the environment not as a background, but as a weapon and ally, this for me is the pinnacle of exploration in a franchise like Ninja Gaiden. To further elevate the level of movement, I want to see refined mechanics, perhaps even evolved from previous games, where mastery of the character is rewarded with almost instinctive and smooth movements. A system that allows combinations of movements in the air, perfect evasions that lead to counterattacks, and strategic takeovers of the environment, establishing fluidity as one of the greatest virtues of the gameplay. This makes perfect sense for a game that always demands a lot of skill. One of the things I would greatly miss if it wasn't in Ninja Gaiden 4 is the sense of risk and reward through movement. I want the player to feel the heat of the decision when launching into long jumps to fragile platforms, or when climbing hurriedly to avoid attacks. The difference between surviving or dying has to be there, firmly tied to the execution of these maneuvers. No overly safe or easy movements that take away the adrenaline that made the series legendary. I also believe that an open or semi-open world, which allows vertical and horizontal exploration with varied challenges, would contribute greatly to this movement experience. Fans want to get lost in the ability to master the map, finding shortcuts, secrets, and alternative areas that can only be accessed with special movement abilities. This not only elevates exploration, but greatly increases replayability, because knowledge of the spaces becomes crucial. The high-level movement must reflect the character's evolution in the game, with unlocks that make the player feel they are evolving in their mastery as a ninja. As the progression continues, longer jumps, longer wall runs, slides, and more complex aerial attacks should emerge, keeping the player always motivated to explore every corner and test every ability and environments designed for it. The combination of fluid movement with an enriched and challenging exploration system would make every fan feel that Ninja Gaiden 4 is not just a continuation, but an evolutionary leap for the series. For me, this is essential for the game to stand out and keep the flame alive in the memory and fingers of those who experienced the pains and glories of the previous titles. The introduction of diverse and customizable weapons must never compromise this identity. That is, having a giant arsenal is no good if the weapons are not balanced so that the player really needs to think before using them. I like games that challenge me to learn patterns, to think of combinations, and to make quick decisions to stay alive. Therefore, customization, for me, must serve this purpose: to amplify the complexity and satisfaction of combat, not to dilute it. I also imagine that the customizable weapon system could be aligned with an immersive narrative. Having the possibility of creating weapons forged with special tools, found in side missions or unique events, would add a layer of emotional meaning every time I pick up a weapon that was created from scratch by me. Finally, the diversity and personalization of weapons have an incredible power to maintain a long replay value. I personally love revisiting games when I know I can try new approaches. The feeling of tackling the same phase or fight with completely different equipment and still feeling challenged and entertained is, for me, one of the greatest compliments a game can receive. Ninja Gaiden 4 deserves this mechanic to seal its legacy, allowing old and new fans to explore and reuse the title in unique ways. If there's one thing that always stands out in Ninja Gaiden, it's its bosses. These epic moments that define the experience as a brutal and rewarding test. For Ninja Gaiden 4, what I most hope for, and what every fan deserves, are bosses that are not just difficult, but truly different from each other. I want to feel that every fight against a boss is an event of its own, a challenge that tests not only reflexes, but creativity and tactical adaptation. For me, Generic bosses, or those that only change in the damage caused, are not enough. They need to have a visual and combat style that makes the heart race, a unique presence that is marked in the memory. I think of bosses that bring fresh and interesting mechanics, nothing that is limited to pressing the same buttons with exact timings, but rather that force the player to think outside the box. I like to be surprised with new patterns, varied stages within the same fight, which change as the health bar drops. This dynamic leaves me more immersed and satisfied, especially when the difficulty is not unfair, but perfectly calibrated so that the victory has that taste of real accomplishment. This feeling is so good that I love to save these moments, especially to comment on in my videos, as they are the apex of the Ninja Gaiden experience. Visually, a good boss needs to be grandiose and committed to the series' dark and visceral universe. I don't want fighting modes against generic characters or repeated models. I want to meet true monsters and warriors who seem to have come out of the shadows. The visual impact combined with striking sound effects are details that increase the tension and make the victory worth much more. And I'll confess that I also like those bosses that tell a story or have a design that translates their brutal and complex personality. Because for me, this gives weight to the fight and makes the player create an emotional connection, whether to hate or admire the opponent. Another personal wish is that these bosses can explore different sizes and combat styles, from giants that test your precision and timing with massive attacks to more agile opponents that require quick reflexes and movement. This prevents the boss fight from becoming monotonous and always brings an experience adjusted to challenge your mastery of the Ninja Gaiden mechanics. I really like it when a game manages to balance these extremes, making every encounter matter and demand something beyond the basic from the player. In addition, I think that incorporating small stories into boss battles, even if they are told by expressions, gestures, or environments, always brings a differential. This doesn't have to be something long, but even a subtle detail that communicates to the player a little of the enemy's motivation, desperation, or fury transforms the combat into something memorable. I confess that this is lacking in many modern games, and it would be a luxury to see Ninja Gaiden revisiting this aspect to make each boss more than just an obstacle. A new protagonist in Ninja Gaiden 4 would be, by far, the most controversial and at the same time the most intriguing point of the franchise. Talking about replacing Ryu Hayabusa practically sounds like blasphemy to some fans. After all, he is the soul and symbol of the series since the Nintendo days. At the same time, it is undeniable that many feel that the character has already reached the peak of his narrative arc. What more could Ryu live through after so many legendary confrontations, demons, gods, and wars? The entry of Yakumo, a new protagonist, could revitalize the series, but only if it is done carefully, respecting the legacy of the dragon. The key is not to erase Ryu, but to leave him as a living legend, perhaps even as the mentor, a figure who inspires this new hero to follow his own path. Yakumo, as a spiritual successor, would need to have his own identity, a strong reason to exist within the Ninja Gaiden universe. He cannot be a simple clone of Ryu with a modern design. His personality, his way of fighting, and even his ninja philosophy need to contrast with Hayabusa's cold and contained style. It would be interesting to see a more impulsive protagonist, with doubts, fears, and even some rebellion, something that reflects a new generation of warriors in a more chaotic and morally gray world. This approach would allow exploring conflicts that Ryu would never have, because he has always been the ninja of honor and discipline. Yakumo could represent the emotional imbalance that comes with carrying the legacy of an almost divine hero. From a gameplay perspective, the change of protagonist opens up space to radically transform the combat style. Ryu has always had fast and precise combat, almost perfect in his technical execution, but this also creates a feeling of repetition for those who have already mastered the previous games. Yakumo could introduce less refined, more brutal and unpredictable techniques, alluding to the idea of a ninja still in training, with his own style. Imagine a combo system that evolves as he gets stronger, or a combat mode that reflects his emotional state. The angrier, the faster and riskier he fights. This type of mechanic would bring freshness to the game without betraying the intense action DNA that has always defined Ninja Gaiden. But of course, talking about putting Ryu aside is poking the nostalgia hornet's nest. For fans to accept Yakumo, the game needs to treat Ryu Hayabusa with almost mythical respect. There is no point in simply replacing him and acting as if he didn't exist. The narrative would have to build this transition as part of destiny. Perhaps Ryu was missing, in meditation, injured after a divine battle, or even involved in a plot of sacrifice to protect the ninja world. Yakumo could be the disciple who receives the mission of continuity, not as a substitute, but as the heir to the flame. This way, old fans would understand that Ryu's spirit still lives through Yakumo. Furthermore, this change can be used as a metaphor about the franchise's own cycle. Just as Ryu went through eras and challenges, now it would be the turn of the new generation to carry the Ninja Gaiden name forward. The player would feel the weight of this both in the story and in the fights. Imagine facing enemies who mockingly say, "You are not the true dragon." This type of provocation creates emotional involvement. It makes Yakumo fight not only against demons, but also against the shadow of a myth. It is this type of depth that could transform the controversy into powerful narrative. Another essential aspect would be Yakumo's visual and posture. He cannot look like a Ryu 2.0. His design should reflect youth mixed with tradition, perhaps a technological ninja suit, a different katana, power tattoos, or even a symbolic mask that refers to the Hayabusa clan, but with personal touches. Small details that show that he respects the legacy, but is not a slave to it. A new protagonist needs to be memorable on his own merit, and this involves aesthetics, voice acting, and even the soundtrack that accompanies him. Yakumo needs to sound like the beginning of a new era, without erasing the past. Finally, the controversy is precisely the seasoning that the franchise lacks. Ninja Gaiden 4 needs to cause impact, generate conversations and divided opinions. This is a sign that the series is still alive and can reinvent itself. Yakumo can be the push that was missing for this. As long as Ryu remains the pillar of the myth, the emergence of a new protagonist is not a betrayal, but an evolution. Deep down, what fans most want is to feel that thrill again that only Ninja Gaiden brings. And if Yakumo manages to reignite that feeling, even bringing controversy, then he will have fulfilled what Ryu started decades ago, keeping the Hayabusa clan alive in the hearts of players.
Cash in the bag, stadium packed, baby I'm back, baby I'm back. I got the cash in the bag, stadium packed.